Elena Whitmore sat in the back of her black luxury SUV, barely glancing out the tinted window as her driver inched forward through the early afternoon traffic. Rain tapped against the glass in a rhythmic lullaby, and her perfectly manicured fingers scrolled absently through her phone. Emails, launch updates, a new invitation to a charity gala she had no interest in attending, it was all noise. As the only daughter of Charles Whitmore, founder of the Whitmore fashion empire, Elena had grown up in the world of champagne brunches, stitched silk, and flashing cameras. But the truth was, for all the beauty surrounding her, she felt nothing but a void inside. Today was just another monotonous day until the SUV rolled to a stop near a faded crosswalk on the edge of a rougher part of the city. She hadn't been in this neighborhood in years, not since she was a teenager and her father warned her to stay away. Yet something tugged at her to look up, just as a sharp screech shattered the hum of the rain. A rusted blue bicycle shot into view, its rider a boy no older than 17, with shaggy dark hair and a backpack that looked like it had seen better days. Elena gasped, instinctively placing a hand over her mouth as she saw the real danger, a silver sedan speeding through a yellow light, horn blaring too late. The boy wasn't aiming to cross safely, he was aiming to save. Just inches from the car, he leapt off his bike and lunged forward, scooping a tiny girl in pigtails off the wet street. The car screeched to a stop, missing them by a breath. Elena flung open the car door without a second thought and rushed into the rain. The boy sat on the pavement, arms scraped and bleeding, holding the crying girl like a protective older brother. The teddy bear she clutched was missing an ear, her rain boots mismatched. Elena knelt beside them, unsure what to say. "Are you okay?" she managed, breathless. The boy looked up, startled by her presence, then nodded. "She's all right. That's all that matters." His voice was calm, too calm for what had just happened. There was no drama in his expression, no need for praise, just relief. Elena reached for her phone to call for help, but the boy gently waved her off. "We're fine. I've had worse." She noticed the way he positioned himself to shield the girl from the cold, soaking himself instead. A warmth spread through her chest, strange and unfamiliar. "Let me at least take you to a clinic," she offered. "My car's right there." He shook his head firmly. "She's scared. She just needs to get home. I'll be fine." It was then that the little girl tugged on his sleeve and whispered, "Zeke, my bear." Elena caught the name, Zeke. The boy rose carefully and scanned the street before retrieving the damaged stuffed toy. He returned it to the girl with a smile that could have lit up the whole block. She clung to his hand, trusting him completely. Elena looked at him, truly looked. Torn sneakers, a t-shirt too thin for the weather, yet eyes filled with resilience. She finally introduced herself, unsure why she even needed to. "I'm Elena," she said quietly. Zeke only nodded. "Doesn't matter who you are. I'd still have done the same thing." Her driver urged her back into the car, and with hesitation, she obeyed, watching Zeke walk away into the drizzle, pushing the girl's hair back gently as they disappeared down a side street. She couldn't stop thinking about it, not the near accident, but the calm hero who didn't ask for anything in return. In a world where everyone wore masks, his honesty hit her like a tidal wave. He was supposed to be just another poor boy on a bike, someone she'd forget by nightfall. But Elena knew, this moment wasn't done with her yet. Something had shifted. And she had a feeling her carefully stitched life was about to be undone, and rewoven into something real. The morning after her encounter with Zeke, Elena sat at her kitchen counter, staring at a plate of untouched croissants. The espresso machine hissed in the background, but she wasn't hearing it. She couldn't stop thinking about that boy, the way he risked his life without hesitation, the way he comforted the child without seeking praise. It wasn't just his bravery that lingered with her, it was his gentleness, his dignity. She had seen countless men in tailored suits speak at charity events about the disadvantaged youth, but none of them had the look Zeke did in his eyes. That look said he lived it. And for the first time in years, Elena felt a pull towards something she didn't understand. She needed to see him again. Not for a soundbite. Not for a photo op. But for her own sake. Her own humanity. Later that afternoon, she dressed in jeans and a simple gray sweatshirt, tied her hair in a bun, and left the makeup behind. No entourage. No designer bag. Just herself, a paper bag with sandwiches, and a question in her heart. She returned to the same neighborhood, unsure where to start looking. The crosswalk was empty, but a block away, she heard children laughing. Following the sound, she turned a corner and found a small, cracked basketball court beside an old community center. There, surrounded by kids, was Zeke. He was squatting beside a boy with a flat tire, gently showing him how to patch it up with a smile on his face. The same tattered backpack sat near his feet. He didn't see her at first. She stood still, unsure whether to interrupt. But then one of the children pointed. Zeke. That lady's back. He stood, brushing dirt off his jeans. You again, he said, not coldly, just curious. She smiled sheepishly and held up the bag. I brought lunch. I figured you wouldn't say yes if I just offered you something, so I brought enough for the whole squad. His expression softened. That was smart, he chuckled. They'll eat anything that isn't yesterday's noodles. He gestured for her to come closer. Elena sat on the concrete, passing out sandwiches, watching as the kids devoured the food with messy hands and full cheeks. When she offered one to Zeke, he shook his head and passed it to a quiet little boy in the corner. That's Mikey. He missed breakfast. Elena blinked. But, what about you? Zeke shrugged. I've had worse days. She watched him for a while, how he tied shoelaces, wiped dirty hands, listened like every word mattered. These weren't just kids in need, they were his community. His family. You do this every day? She asked. He nodded. After school. Weekends too. Some of them don't have anyone. I had my mom, before she passed last year. Now it's just me. He said it so matter-of-factly that Elena almost missed the ache in his voice. What about the system? Social services, she asked. He shook his head. Too slow. Too broken. These kids need love now. Not paperwork. As dusk fell, Elena stayed longer than she intended. She learned each child's name, their favorite snack, what they wanted to be when they grew up. She laughed when one girl told her she wanted to be a pizza delivery astronaut. She hadn't laughed like that in months. She helped tape a ripped book cover, listened to Zeke teach fractions using chalk and a crumbling wall, and marveled at how much he gave with so little. When it was time to leave, Zeke walked her to her car, holding the bag of trash from their meal. Thanks for coming, he said, not out of politeness, but sincerity. Elena hesitated before getting in. You know, she said softly, I thought I came here to help you. But I think, maybe you're helping me. Zeke didn't answer. He just smiled, that quiet, knowing smile that would stay with her long after she drove away. Elena couldn't remember the last time she felt so restless. Days had passed since her afternoon with Zeke and the kids at the community center, but her mind kept circling back to it like a song stuck on repeat. Something about that world, the scraped knees, the hopeful voices, the way Zeke carried more weight than a boy his age ever should, had awakened a longing in her chest that money and fame had never reached. She had grown up in a world of privilege, where problems were solved with checks and distance. But this was different. She didn't just want to help from the outside anymore. She wanted to understand from within. That need drew her back to the center again and again, sometimes bringing books, sometimes snacks, sometimes just herself and a listening ear. The children welcomed her like an old friend now, and Zeke, well, he remained as humble and guarded as ever. He smiled, he joked, but there was a sadness in his eyes she hadn't yet unlocked. That mystery kept pulling her deeper. One rainy Thursday, Elena arrived at the center with plans to donate coats, only to find it unexpectedly closed. The usual noise of bouncing basketballs and children's laughter was absent. Confused, she asked a nearby shop owner if they'd seen Zeke. "Kid doesn't live far," the woman said, nodding toward the alleyway behind the block. "Usually takes shelter when the rain gets heavy." With a nervous heart, Elena followed the winding path between buildings until she reached the back of a boarded-up laundromat. There, under a makeshift tin awning, she saw Zeke. He was huddled on a worn-out couch cushion, blanket wrapped around two smaller boys nestled beside him. The mattress they slept on was flattened and damp. Nearby, a few plastic bags held clothes and a half-eaten sandwich. Her heart cracked open. She had assumed he had a home, that he went somewhere safe when the sun went down. But this was survival. Zeke heard her before he saw her and quickly stood, trying to block her view. "You weren't supposed to see this," he muttered, embarrassed. Elena stepped forward, eyes brimming with tears. "You're homeless," she whispered. "Zeke, you've been helping all those kids while you've been living like this?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked down at the two boys sleeping peacefully behind him. "They needed someone more than I needed comfort," he said softly. "Their mom took off months ago. No one even noticed they were alone. I couldn't just walk away." Elena was stunned. All this time, she'd been admiring Zeke's generosity without realizing the depth of his sacrifice. He had nothing, and yet he gave everything. "Why didn't you ask for help?" she asked, voice shaking. "Because people don't really listen," he replied. "They give charity, but they don't give care. And I didn't want pity. I just wanted to matter." His words pierced her like glass. He didn't want to be saved. He wanted dignity. Purpose. Respect. She didn't know what to say. The girl who once ran multi-million-dollar projects suddenly felt useless in the face of raw humanity. But that moment changed something inside her. She wasn't just a visitor anymore. She was invested. Deeply. Fiercely. That night, Elena returned home with her heart in pieces and her mind racing with ideas. This couldn't be a temporary act of kindness. It had to be something lasting. Something worthy of the boy who had already taught her more about strength and sacrifice than anyone ever had. She opened her laptop, cancelled her upcoming gala appearance, and began drafting a new plan, a foundation, a center, a movement. One built on Zeke's values, not just her resources. Because if this world had even one more Zeke in it, it was worth rebuilding from the ground up. 6 months later, the world around Elena Whitmore looked completely different. The woman who once measured her success by front-row seats at Fashion Week and red carpet appearances now wore worn sneakers, carried a backpack filled with art supplies, and spent most of her days at a place called Zeke's Place. It stood on the same cracked lot where the old, forgotten community center once barely functioned. Now reborn through love, sweat, and a vision forged by a boy who had once slept behind a laundromat. The building was bright and colorful, every wall covered in murals painted by the children who called it their sanctuary. One corner held shelves of donated books, another a reading nook shaped like a rocket ship. There was a homework station, an indoor garden, and most importantly, a warm meal served every day without question. Zeke still came every day, riding his same bike, now cleaned and painted neon yellow by the kids, with the word "Hope" stenciled across the frame. He was technically a scholarship student now, attending classes at a nearby college thanks to Elena's quiet support, but he insisted on volunteering each afternoon. "They're still my family," he told her once. "I need them as much as they need me." Elena never argued. She understood that kind of devotion now. She felt it too. Her name was still powerful in social circles, but she used it differently now, hosting fundraisers not for fashion, but for food programs, education grants, and shelters. But she refused to take credit for the spark that started it all. That belonged to Zeke. One crisp autumn morning, Elena arrived early and found Zeke already there, sweeping leaves from the sidewalk. He looked up and grinned. "You're late," he teased. She rolled her eyes. "You're impossible." They laughed. The kind of laughter that only comes from trust, from knowing you've seen the worst in someone and stayed anyway. As the kids began to arrive, hugging Zeke and pulling her into games, Elena looked around and felt something she hadn't known she was missing for so long: peace. She had finally found what her soul had been aching for. Not applause. Not approval. But meaning. She glanced at the mural on the far wall, the one the kids had painted in secret as a gift. It showed a girl in designer heels standing at a crosswalk, and a boy on a bicycle racing into the light. Above them were words she would never forget: "Kindness begins when you see someone for who they really are." That evening, as the sun cast gold across the city skyline, Elena stood beside Zeke at the rooftop of the center. They looked out over the neighborhood, now buzzing with life. Children played, families gathered, and walls once silent now told stories of resilience. "You changed everything," Elena said softly. Zeke shook his head. "No. We did. You just remembered who you really are." She smiled at that, realizing how true it was. She hadn't become someone new, she'd simply uncovered the version of herself buried beneath expectations, money, and fear. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "what would have happened if I hadn't stopped that day?" Zeke looked at her and replied, "You didn't stop, Elena. You started." And he was right. What began as a single act of witnessing a boy's quiet bravery had turned into a legacy that neither of them could have predicted. Elena thought she had everything. Until she realized she had never truly lived. Now, every brick of the center, every child's smile, every healed heart stitched into the fabric of their community was proof that kindness wasn't just a gesture. It was a mission. And she would spend the rest of her life honoring the boy on the bike who gave her a new purpose.